everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. In this episode, I chat with Karl Davis, the executive director of the Crow Shadow Institute for the Arts. Karl was very generous with both his time and his transparency as we chatted about the residencies, the history of the program, and the ways that Crow Shadow seeks to serve its community and look to the future. If you're enjoying these episodes of Pine Copper Lime, it'd mean a lot to me if you could leave a review or share it with a fellow printmaker who you think might find it interesting. It really does make a difference, especially when we're just trying to get this podcast off the ground. The podcast is released every 2 weeks, and in between those 2 weeks, I release an article on the Pine Copper Lime website dedicated to the subject of the upcoming podcast. It's a good place to see things like photographs of the prints that I'm chatting about with my guests. Pine Copper Lime can also be found on Facebook and Instagram as well, which is a great way to keep up with what I've been up to. So without further ado, here's Karl Davis.
Hello.
Hi, Karl. Okay. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast here.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I have to tell you, I actually talked to Wenjin Ho last week, and she told me that I need to make sure that I get a pun from you at some point in our conversation.
Well, that usually when they're puns on demand are hard to come by. So
I know I certainly understand. I know it's an art form. So, but
Sure. Wyndham was so she was here last year. She comes to Crow Shadow quite a bit. I think every other year. So she tries to make a trip out here. And so last year was the first year she was here for the full time that I was here. I think she had just completed a residency right before I started in 2014. Mm-hmm. And she's an amazing person in general. She's so diverse in her background in terms of her education and arts background. And so the way she works is pretty unique even for our setting, which Crow Shadow is fairly unique in general too.
Definitely. And she's such a lovely person. We had a really good chat, so I'll make sure to send it to you as well when we're done with editing and all that, because she's great. She spoke fondly of her experiences at Crow Shadow for sure.
Yeah.
So this seems like a good segue into asking that. How did you end up coming to Crow Shadow? Can you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and let people know how you ended up where you are and what your role there entails?
Sure. Well, I came to Crow Shadow in 2014. I'm a native Oregonian. I was born and raised in Portland. I have an art history undergrad degree, and I worked in galleries throughout Portland. Shortly after I finished my degree in 2003. And then my wife and I moved to Alberta to go to school to get our master's degrees at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And in 2014, finished that and found out about this job opening and applied and got to come back home to Oregon. So as the executive director here, I'm pretty much in charge of all the operational aspects of the organization, day-to-day things, but also a lot of fundraising, grant writing, program scheduling, since we're a very small organization, I do a bit of facility maintenance and all those fun things that you don't have to think about that have to get done, but we all kind of pitch in. And Crow Shadow, as I mentioned, is a fairly small organization, but we've been here over 25 years now. This is actually our 26th year. We were founded in 1992 by the painter James Lavador, who is a Walla Walla, and he is part of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, where we're located. So when he started Crow Shadow, it was the idea of bringing creative people from the reservation into kind of a structure of planned learning and opportunities for creative outlets. But it's kind of grown in certain ways and we've focused down in certain ways. 2001, we hired our master printer, Frank Jansen, and since then have been doing print residencies with contemporary Indigenous and Native artists from all over the country and parts of the world too. When Frank retired in actually just last year, we hired a new master printer, Judith Bauman, and she's been in charge of the studio since then. And we're continuing that program kind of full force. So.
Yeah, that's great. So that's basically how the Institute ended up being in Pendleton, is it sounds like the founder has a connection to that particular area. Is that where the tribe is from, is that area?
Yeah. So the Confederated Tribe of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, it's three tribes, the Cayuse, the Umatilla, and the Walla Walla, and James Lavador is Walla Walla. So it was really focused, and we are still located on the reservation, and it's very focused on the Native and Indigenous community. We also facilitate things like traditional arts workshops, beadwork, basket weaving, those kind of activities, and kind of serving the community at a very local, immediate need, but also trying to bring in people from outside the area to teach some of those classes, and also bring in people to learn from those classes. So it is very community driven, it's very community oriented, and it has a lot of very localized constituents, but we do serve a much broader community through the contemporary printmaking facility and our residency program.
Yeah, how did it come to be a printmaking facility? Did James have a connection to printmaking?
Kind of tenuously, but yeah. So when he was, starting his arts career and getting a bit more recognition, he was invited to a number of different residencies around the country, to places like Rutgers and Tamarind Institute in Albuquerque. And through those residencies, he really was kind of shown the what printmaking can do for just not just the artist but a community, and how it's a kind of a democratic technique or process, I guess, printmaking in general, but especially lithography, which is what we focus on, through his time at Tamarind and meeting people like Marge Devon, and at Rutgers meeting Eileen Fody, and having that kind of that exposure to those different types of printmaking, and what a master printer can do, and what printmaking can do for an artist to expand their kind of artistic vocabulary, but also give an artist a chance to kind of disseminate their work to a broader audience. It's kind of, you make one painting that gets put in one place and seen by a small number of people. If you make a print, an edition of 20, it can be disseminated to 20 different places, and exponentially number of people can see that work, and so gives that artist a bit more exposure, and can broaden their career as well. So that's the kind of things that he was thinking of or seeing happen in those residencies elsewhere. And when he started Crochetto, it was with a group of people as well on the reservation. It wasn't just him alone. There was another artist that was sharing a studio space here in the same building that we're still located, and any number of supporters of his on the reservation and in the community, the larger Pendleton community, started Crochetto as kind of on a whim a little bit, but with the idea that printmaking would be a focus down the line as an integral part of what we're doing. And it's kind of come to fruition, having a master printer, having a full professional printmaking studio on a Native American reservation. That's a really unique aspect to what we do, and to the printmaking community, I think, in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things, of course, that printmaking has is that aspect of the community building, and the fact that it's by nature this collaborative medium. And if you're looking at sort of serving a community and creating space for collaboration, it seems like printmaking fits into that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the collaborative aspect, I think, is really key to what we do for artists, especially. We like to invite artists that don't have printmaking backgrounds themselves, and to give them the freedom of the studio, and have the master printer be the technical brains of the operation, essentially, and give the artist the freedom to create an image, or build an image through the printmaking, but also kind of guide them in that, in a way. And the decisions are always, the artist is always making the creative decision, but with input from the master printer or the apprentice, but also being informed by the community at large, or the environment. Those are all, I think, exciting aspects of the collaborative print process too.
Yeah, certainly. So you mentioned inviting artists. Is it mostly an invitational basis? Is that how they end up coming to you?
Right now, yes, because we are still fairly small physical location. We have two presses, one master printer, one residence room. We do have to maintain a fairly small program, and so uh, all of our residencies are through invitation only, and it has been successful in that we're still keeping a large interest in those residencies, and we do have a number of people that express interest in coming to us, and we try to work with as many different people as we can while still giving them that individual opportunity, individual attention while they're here. To have an invitation program, it can seem I guess a bit elitist in a way, and
Mm.
I do try to shy away from that attitude. I mean, we try to accommodate as many people as we can, but because it's just such a small program, when I started in 2014 here, I wanted to be as open about it as possible. So I surveyed a number of arts professionals within Oregon, especially because a majority of our funding for the residencies come through the Ford Family Foundation, which is an Oregon-centric funding organization, and their requirements for our grant are that we bring in Oregon-based artists. So I surveyed a number of Oregon-based arts professionals within academic institutions, galleries, other arts practices, places like that, and we compiled a list of probably about 45 names of artists that would fulfill the grant requirements, but also be artists that we would want to work with. And from that list, we have a selection committee within the organization, myself, two board members, and a consulting artist. And we then pick each year which artists we're going to work with. From the Ford Family Foundation, it's called the Golden Spot Award. We invite 3 artists a year, and then try to expand a little bit through other funding. We try to bring in at least one other artist from outside the region, so nationally recognized artist. And those grants or those residencies have been funded through places like the Meyer Memorial Trust. And next year we actually received our first National Endowment for the Arts grant, and that will be
Congrats.
funding three artists, 3 nationally recognized artists from outside the region.
That's really great. And so it sounds like, if, sort of looking from your website, you work primarily with Indigenous artists, but not exclusively Indigenous artists. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. One of the visions of our organization, this idea is bringing creative people together, as James Labrador mentioned once, and kind of reiterate this a lot, is that we bring the reservation to the world and the world to the reservation.
Mm.
And so by bringing creative people to Crow Shadow, whether they're Indigenous or not, it's kind of bridging a lot of different communities and building those kind of connections that then strengthen both communities themselves. An artist without, non-Indigenous or non-Native artists coming to the reservation for the first time might experience something different than a Native person would. But we try to give as many opportunities to, people of color and other backgrounds at the same time that we're inviting Native and Indigenous artists to our studio.
Yeah, I love to hear you talk a little bit about what it's like to run a center in Pendleton specifically and having that kind of rural aspect of it, but also having the Indigenous community so close and that location, I think, and how that I think that affects the experience that people have there.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting aspect. It can be sometimes a challenge to be so far removed from larger metropolitan centers, but in a way, I think our location lends itself to a bit of magic in a way. We struggle a little bit with even the local population and recognizing, the kind of things that we do here and the value added aspect of what we bring to the community. But it is always really special to have um, someone from the community, a local person, walk in the door and exclaim like, "Wow, I can't believe you guys are here. This is amazing."
Mm-hmm.
So, but it gives us a bit of I mean, it is a unique aspect to have a printmaking studio on a reservation. And so it gives us a bit of cachet and certain areas. And then when, the print is done, the prints are done, the editions are complete, the artists have signed them, and we can carry that work to print fairs in Portland and New York and places like that. And people from those areas can see the high quality work that we're doing, the prints that we're producing, the artists that we're working with. They get to see like this kind of bit of magic, and how it doesn't have to be in the middle of the city to be good art. We can produce good art everywhere, anywhere in the world. And we're kind of a testament to that. And the reservation is just east of Pendleton proper. And it's about I think, I don't know exact numbers, but it's 130,000 acres of the reservation itself encompasses, farmland, forest land, rangeland, a lot of different areas. But Pendleton itself is about a 15-minute drive from where we're located, just west of the reservation. And to kind of go back a little bit to maybe the first part of your question too, what's it like to be running this reservation-based creative center in a rural location? Pendleton itself is very creative. I think there's a ton of creativity both in Pendleton and on the reservation. There's creative people making music and making arts and crafts and making arts itself, and there is, I think, a very open culture of creativity throughout the region, in not just in Pendleton and the reservation, but other towns nearby. LeGrand has a university, Eastern Oregon University. There we go. And they have a really thriving, comprehensive arts program. Walla Walla has Whitman College, and they have an amazing printmaking facility there as well. So those things being in close proximity. And I should mention also Walla Walla's foundry. They bring in nationally and international artists to work in their foundry on projects. So those kind of things are happening in the region. At the same time, Pendleton is a very music-oriented town. There's tons of music all the time. There's musicians traveling between Portland and Boise, and we're smack dab in the middle of that route, 3 hours from both cities. And we get people from all over the Northwest to come through and play music in town for, one night gig, and they're gone, but they leave very lasting impressions on the town, and so we have that kind of creative juices flowing throughout the region. And so we do have a number of opportunities for collaboration with local community organizations. And one project that's coming up, we will be working in collaboration with Oregon East Symphony, which is a nonprofit symphony based in Pendleton. And together we're bringing the artist Raven Chacon to Crow Shadow and to the symphony to compose a new chamber orchestral piece that will be performed. And at the same time that he's here to do that, rehearsals and those compositional parts, he'll be in the studio producing prints with us. Yeah. And then they'll be presented at the same time that they're performing his new composition. So it's a really exciting project coming up, and it's a really exciting collaboration with a local community organization, creative organization, and that's first 2 weeks of February of next year. So that's the kind of things that are happening, and it's not really on a regular basis, but there's a lot of that kind of undercurrent, that creative ideas and things happening throughout the region that we really try to kind of latch onto and help promote and feed too.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that cross-medium collaboration as well, because of course we can artificially create the boundaries between music and visual arts and dance and performance and all of that. So I love breaking down those walls when it happens, because really great things can come out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question I have, I realize wasn't a pre-prepared one. It was something just sort of occurred to me while you were talking, so it may not be as clear. So let me know. But when you were talking about bringing in artists from other places who aren't Indigenous, and I'm thinking about people who are maybe coming from Europe or Asia who have a colonial history that is not nearly as recent. And so understanding that complex and fraught and sometimes painful relationship between the colonizers and the Indigenous communities, and that really hard history that's there, and a history that's often, of course, not taught or explored. nearly enough. Do people coming from places like that have kind of a steep learning curve to understand that dynamic, or are they? Do you find that it's something that is informs their practice in any way?
A little bit, and I kind of, I guess I'm going to skirt the question a little bit as well, though, in that, we don't. One, we're not a political organization, so
Right.
we're a creative organization that that builds opportunities for social, educational, and economic development, but we're not kind of, we're not building those opportunities with, I guess, with an aim for a statement in any way. When the
Mm-hmm.
artists are here and they're working in the studio, they might be addressing certain issues that are personal to them, or that are pertinent to maybe political or current situations. We had an artist here last year who had just been at Standing Rock, and his work was in general very political, but his work while here in the studio was very personal, which was an interesting thing to happen. So yeah, I don't know if it really has come through in the attitude or the approach that artists have while in studio. We certainly are aware and try to maintain a certain level of respect for those issues. Especially myself as a white male, running a Native and Indigenous arts organization. I have
Yeah.
to definitely be aware and cognizant of those kind of issues, and be respectful to them. But at the same time, we don't dictate that kind of approach for any of the artists that are here, or try to suss that out while they're here. If an artist is responding to that in a way, then that will come through in the art. But honestly, we try to maintain as much openness as we can through the studio practice and studio program, and the other programs that we run. So it really hasn't been. I mean, I personally haven't seen it as an issue of access or recognition, I guess. But it's honestly, I don't think we would ever try to squash that either. If an
Mm-hmm.
artist wants to express themselves in that way, then that would be absolutely their right to do while they're here in studio.
That makes a lot of sense, and it seems like it'd be important that the the facilitator who's offering these opportunities would maintain a kind of neutrality, maybe for lack of a better word, because you wouldn't want to feel like you were dictating what's expected of what's being produced. That you would want to leave that open to the artist. So yeah,
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about it. I mean, I'm sure you've been around for 25 years, and I'm sure in that time, a lot of the dialogue and ideas about indigenous art administration has changed in that time, and I'm sure you all are quite aware of it. Do you know of like ways that Crow Shadow has sort of evolved to that, or adapted, or things that have changed in that time?
Um, I wouldn't. I don't know if we've evolved or adapted in any way. I think as a nonprofit, there's always a level of adaptation to community needs and responding to those needs. But I don't think it's ever been an overt goal or kind of strategy to address those issues. I think in terms of just how we were founded and how it's been run, and the kind of goals that Crow Shadow has kind of set for itself over the years, it's always been to maintain the integrity of the art that's being produced, and the community that it's serving, and be as open to those things as possible. And I'd say we're not without controversy in some ways. I'm sure that not we can't please every member of the community. We can't address every single need of
Mm.
of such a unique kind of situation that we're in. But we try to be as open as possible and accommodating as possible to to everyone who comes through the door, whether it's, kids wanting to learn how to make prints through lino cuts and things like that, to, facilitating those traditional arts classes, to very well established, contemporary Native artists who have very particular, approach to their art making, and we try to accommodate them through the master printer program.
Would you talk maybe a little bit more in depth about the master printer artist collaboration and how that works? Because that's always something that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, so when, as I mentioned earlier, when Jim had been to Tamarind and saw that model of the collaborative printmaking, it's based on a much older model of printmaking done, lithography invented in the 18th century, and kind of grew from there. Um, when we have a master printer, our program started, it was the idea that we could bring in an artist who had no printmaking background. They could work with a master printer for 2 weeks. The master printer has the technical know-how, has the expertise. Printmaking itself is very technical in some ways, and brain heavy in a lot of ways. And lithography then takes that and it makes it even more
Hmm.
exponential in terms of
Yeah.
technical. It's a kind of a magical process that I still don't understand, and I've seen it happen hundreds of times now. So the master printer, they guide the artist, gives them the materials to produce the plates, gives them, background on how certain materials work with certain other materials, guides the process in terms of, what layers work in which manner and which order, possibly, not a creative or the aesthetic idea of what colors go with what colors, but how those colors will interact once they're layered on the page.
Hmm.
Um, and the artist comes in. We try to give them some background before they get here, and there's some collaborative, conversations happening before they get here in terms of their goals for the 2 weeks that they're here, possibly um, the the type of work that they're going to be working on, whether it's going to be the lithography or possibly monoprints or monotypes, um, or even some relief printing. And then when they're here, it's just about the process, about getting the image to the page either through the photolitho process or even stone work, and then proofing, going through all layers of color proofing, color trial proofing, with the goal of those 2 weeks to have completed an approval to print. So the artist is signing on the back of that print, approval to print with necessary drying times and all those things. So after the artist leaves, then the master printer and their assistant will then publish the work. They'll pull those editions depending on, um, you know, they'll have with the artist, they'll have agreed on a goal for the edition size. So we generally stay below 20, but sometimes a more technically involved process or print will shoot for 12, and hopefully we'll get 14, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. So that work is published after the artist is gone, and then once it's curated and the edition is culled to an exacting degree, then the artist then either comes back or we take the work to them, and they sign and number them, and then we enter one of those prints into our permanent collection. It's framed here at the studio, and then we have it ready for display, and we loan it to local institutions, regional museums, and things like that for exhibit. And then one of them also goes to the Hallie Ford Museum of Art at
Mm.
University in Salem, and they are our archive institution. So they hold the archive for us. They have the right to photograph the work and display it, but it's not accessioned into their collection. It's still part of our collection, just for safekeeping and longevity. And then the remainder of the work is we hold as the publisher, and we sell it on our website at print fairs and things like that. After publication costs, the artists then get to share in proceeds. We split the proceeds with the artist 50-50. And that helps to maintain our operating budget, but also benefits the artist in the long term. We've worked with I don't know the exact number, but it's almost 50 different artists through our residency program since 2001. And we send checks regularly to about half those artists every year
That's
through
great.
the sale of their prints. So it's a long-term benefit to them as well for their time in studio.
Yeah, that's interesting because so you're functioning really as a gallery as well then in that way, because it's I've heard of other publishing studios where they then just split the edition with the artist, but the fact that you guys also act as the selling agent and sending the checks, I feel like in a way that can be even more beneficial because then the artist doesn't have to worry about finding a home for the prints, you know, once
And
they
that's
have them.
exactly kind of how that started, because we did, I guess, when we first started the residency program before my time, they did split the edition. They were taking that model that other print publishers were doing and splitting the edition with the artist, with the intention that that artist would then go to take that edition, half of the edition, to their gallerist, and their gallerist would then sell them. But I think a number of artists that we work with just didn't have that infrastructure or that part of their career established yet, and they were finding it hard to sell their own prints in ways. So I think after just a couple of years of that, we just took on the full edition, and we do consign works to galleries, but we're the initial sales point for those prints, and that I think it adds a bit of a layer of more work for us to do, but I think it's part, I really do enjoy that aspect to it. Having the opportunity to place, artists' work in personal collections and public collections and museums and things like that, that's pretty rewarding. Um, 2 years ago, we placed 18 prints at the Library of Congress.
Mm.
Um, just last year, we worked with the Whitney Museum of American Art for them to acquire one of our very first prints by Edgar Heap of Birds, and that kind of aspect to the job for me is really personally rewarding. It's being able to promote an artist's career in that way.
Yeah, because you have a background in commercial galleries in Portland a little bit, is that right?
Yeah, I worked as the eventually I worked for almost 7 years for Froelich Gallery in downtown Portland, and eventually was the gallery director for those years. So I worked closely with Charles Froelich there, and was able to work with contemporary artists, both native and non-native, in the Portland art scene and well, Northwest region as well, and then some other as a gallerist in the early finishing your degree, what do? You do
Right.
interning, preparatory work, that kind of stuff. So some other little jobs around the city, but primarily I worked with at Froelich Gallery for a number of years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love what you were to go back to what you said earlier about James's phrase about bringing the world to the reservation and the reservation to the world. And speaking of the sort of the latter half of that, so you mostly do selling online. You said print fairs. Is that sort of the primary way people can see and purchase work that you're producing?
Um, a lot of times people see the work in exhibits that we send around. Like I mentioned, the permanent collection that we have, every single print that we produce, we frame at least one of them, and then we loan those prints out to exhibits, to regional museums and things like that. So that's one aspect. As yeah, the print fairs, we've been doing the Portland Fine Print Fair at the Portland Art Museum every year for the last, now it's almost 5 years. For the last 2 years, and coming up in October, we participate in the Editions and Artists Book Fair in New York at the end of October, and then it's just a lot of word of mouth kind of things. We also, with last year with the Holly Ford Museum of Art, we produced our 25th anniversary exhibit, which was a major retrospective essentially of all the printmaking that's been done at Crow Shadow since 2001. And with Rebecca Dobkins at the university there, Willamette University, she curated it and then helped produce our first book publication. She co-authored an essay with Heather Atone about the history of indigenous printmaking in North America. And then actually, she's a board member, but she's also an art historian. Prudence Roberts wrote a beautiful essay about the history of Crow Shadow itself.
Hmm.
And then the book has been distributed, it's through the University of Washington Press, online and things like that. So that's actually gotten a lot of recognition for us too. But yeah, a lot of our sales do come a little bit through word of mouth, but we also have a gallery at our facility that's open to the public, and we display our work here, and people come in off the street and see it. It's open to the public Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we love having people visit the studio and gallery just to see what we're doing. As I mentioned, yeah, people come in the door and they're blown away. We like to say we have a world-class print facility in the middle of a wheat field, because it's kind of how it feels when you find your way down the gravel road or up the Old State Highway to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really wonderful, and I've always thought of Crow Shadow as a really unique and important model. So I'm certainly glad you guys are there doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's basically all the questions that I have for you, unless there's anything else we didn't touch on that you think people need to know about Crow's Shadow and the work there.
Well, there's one aspect of our programming that I might have touched on a little bit, but I didn't. And I think it
Yeah.
is becoming more and more important to our kind of identity and our programming for the community. We work really closely with Nick Yahweh Community School, which is the charter high school here on the reservation. And for the past 4 years, there was a program prior to my time, but it had ended essentially when some funding ran out from the school district. But when I started here, I kind of reestablished it. So we invite, it's kind of a self-selected group of students each year from the school. They come up to the studio once a week during the school year and work with the master printer. So they've been learning different types of printmaking, a lot of linocut work, but also starting them on screen print, and they've done a few lithographs as well. And the end of each school year, they get to put on an exhibit of their work in the studio, or in the gallery, I should say, to kind of show off to the community and their family and friends what they've been doing in the studio. And then we offer, the students they're producing an edition, so they get to price their work accordingly. And when they sell their work, they get to keep 100% of the proceeds. The prints they generally under $100 each, but to be able to see the students, the community respond to their work and to purchase their work too, I think it's no greater feeling to write a check to a new artist who's
Yeah.
realizing quickly that their art can be kind of a viable, career in a way too. And I think one of the proudest things I can say is that every student now, I think we've had about 16 to 18 students through this program. Every single student has been in the program, has sold at least one of their prints to somebody that they've never met before. So
That's
for the public
great.
to kind of embrace their work and to validate their creative spirit, I think is really special. And that, I think that's kind of something that we don't talk a lot about, but I think is becoming, like as I said, a bigger aspect to our programming in the coming years.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Because I didn't know that was part of the programming, but that's really, really great, and especially having that element of people who don't know the students buying the work. I know adult practicing artists who would love if that happened more often to them.
Yeah, it's selling artwork. That's always a goal of an artist. Even though, well, it's not always a goal. I think making art is always a
Right, right, yeah.
personal endeavor. But to have it validated through public recognition like that, I think is always something that people, you do need a little bit of someone else saying good job, and buying your artwork is the ultimate good job. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. Well, great. So before we sort of sign off, can you just give all the websites and the handles that people need to learn more about Crow's Shadow or see some work and maybe purchase it?
Sure. Well, our website is just www.crowsshadow.org, and you'll have to make sure you got the double S in the middle. And then our Instagram is crows_shadow, and our Instagram is pretty busy, and a lot of artists that come through have their own handles that they promote our Instagram with. We don't really use Twitter a lot, and our Facebook page is just Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts, and all those places will kind of direct back to the same place. And yeah, you can see all the work that's available for sale on the website itself, and there's actually an option to buy if you want to put things in a shopping cart. So we ship worldwide. So
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending a Friday afternoon chatting with me. This is really, really great stuff, and I'm excited to share it with people.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about Crow Shadow and to get to kind of spread the word, proselytize a little bit about printmaking and our programming. So thank you.
Cool. So as the saying goes, that's our show for this week. You can learn more about the Crow Shadow Institute for the Arts through their website. I'll put a link to that, as well as to the book Karl mentioned, the one that was published by the University of Washington Press and celebrates Crow Shadow's 25 years of being a fine art print publisher. I hope to see you all again in 2 weeks' time when I chat with the indelible Miles Calvert. In the meantime, you can follow Pine Copper Line through my Facebook and Instagram, and of course at pinecopperline.com. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. Thanks so much for listening. I can't wait to see you again.